everybody. Welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Monday. Happening right now, a congressional fact-finding mission to the southern U.S. border with Mexico, investigating those detention facilities where hundreds of migrant children have been held over the past few months in what some have compared to torture-like conditions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman of New York, just tweeted a few moments ago after emerging from one of those facilities. She says, "I left the first CPB facility. I see why Customs and Border Protection officers are being so physically and sexually threatening towards me. Officers were keeping women in cells with no water and had told them to drink out of the toilets. This was them on their good behavior in front of members of Congress." A short time ago, I caught up with another member of Congress who had just emerged as part of that delegation, Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a sense about what you saw inside the facility.
Hi, I've just come from El Paso Border Patrol Station number 1, and we are now on the grounds at Clint. What we saw in the facility was extremely disturbing. We were asked to leave our phones and everything behind. We were told we were not able to speak to any of the detainees, but very quickly that broke down, and we were able to go into a cell that was holding 15 women lying on the floor in blue, what would you call them, sleeping bags, which apparently they just recently been issued. In fact, these 15 women, crying, most of them, said that they were just moved inside to this room, which they call the refrigerator, today. They have been 56 days at this border station. They went from 9 to 15 days without showers. 2 women have been separated from their daughters, one an 18-year-old daughter, another a 23-year-old daughter. The 58-year-old mother was on the floor crying, saying, "I have no idea where they've taken her." She was out in the tent with her most recently and has been separated from her. They are hungry. They said they are fed food that is cold, spoiled, food for dogs is what they said.
Some of your colleagues have described the facilities as concentration camps. Do you think that's fair based on what you saw?
I'd say it was definitely camps. Here's why. We took a look, and just like a prison, there was a stainless steel toilet with no seat with water in it. But when we tried the sink, there was no running water. The women said, "Oh, we were told it's okay to drink out of the toilet. That's potable water." They put them in this cell this morning. I have to imagine there's some connection between our visit and moving these women out of tents. Literally, as we just drove here, the temperature gauge read 108. They moved them in this morning, and one of the women gave me an aluminum sheet that she said they had been given and had used for weeks on end. And just recently, they've been allowed a daily shower.
How did it get this bad? Is this a case of gross mismanagement by the agency, a lack of funding, a lack of preparation for the record numbers that we've seen coming across? How did it get to this point, as so many Americans are shocked?
Is to find out. The purpose of our visit is to investigate and to find out how it got to this spot. But when I asked the women, "What are your criminal offenses?" they said, "We wanted to come to America." They're being held as a result of the Trump administration deciding that we will not easily get you refugee status. We will make you suffer. We will treat you like dogs. That is a change as a result of this administration, but there's an awful lot more we need to learn.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about this report that ProPublica has put out. I know you've seen it. The Border Patrol is responding to it. It's a report of a Facebook group of current and former Border Patrol officers and members, allegedly former Border Patrol officers and members, who have really ridiculed you and your colleagues on this visit, racist, sexist comments. Have you heard it all from the agency? Did anyone there respond to you about this?
I'm coming. Just so you know, I thought that was very inadequately dealt with as we sat down for our initial orientation meeting into the El Paso Center. They did say that they were conducting immediately an internal investigation. Think about it, 20,000 Border Patrol agents, many of whom I know are doing a very good job under extraordinarily inhumane circumstances, particularly with this administration's directives. But 9,500 members of this Facebook, it's extremely troubling. It's disgusting. It is craven that they would mock a dead 16-year-old saying, he dies, he dies. the disgusting pieces of those posts, the fact that they threatened to throw stuff at us as members of Congress, think of how they must treat those who are in their custody if they would treat us with that disgusting disrespect. It's extraordinarily troubling, and while CBP says they were doing an internal investigation, I'm confident Congress will be doing its own independent investigation.
Congresswoman Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania, thank you so much for calling in and for your eyewitness to the events there in Clint.
Thank you very much. It's very troubling.
And I'm joined now here in Washington with our immigration reporter, Quinn Owen, who spent last week down in Clint, Texas, just outside that facility doing reporting of your own. Quinn, great to see you. Let's start, though, with the agency's response to this Facebook group and what we know about it. The Congresswoman alluded to it there. This is a secret Facebook group of 9,500 apparent employees. We don't know whether they are all current or former Border Patrol employees, but as you see here on the screen, the current Border Patrol chief does acknowledge that this is troubling and inappropriate, and they are investigating it, and they say they'll hold any employees accountable for any misbehavior. But what are they looking into right now?
So the Border Patrol chief did make that comment, and CBP as a whole, the agency, is aware of it. They're saying they're investigating these claims to see if it was made by actual current Border Patrol members. This Facebook group does include people, we're told, that have formerly left the agency, no longer with the agency, but they're looking to see where exactly those posts came from, and they're saying if these are true, it is inappropriate and disciplinary action will be taken.
And to remind people, this is a Facebook group of Border Patrol officials, apparently, that PROPUBLICA uncovered, and there's some really troubling stuff on there. The Congresswoman alluded to some of the comments, but there are also images as well.
Derogatory comments and images, GIFs that have circulated around the internet, sexist and racist GIFs making fun of migrants that have crossed the border. And some critics are saying this is indicative of broader CBP culture. A former agent that I spoke with said this kind of trend they've seen since 9/11, when crackdown on the border and crackdowns on immigration really started taking place.
Really troubling stuff. We're also, Quinn, learning and hearing for the first time from an immigrant child who was held inside that Clint facility that you were at. A 12-year-old migrant girl who and her 6-year-old sister were interviewed by an attorney in the Associated Press shortly after they were released from detention there. They said they had to sleep on the floor, they ate cold meals, and now for the first time we get to see a little bit of that interview on camera. Here's a little bit of that.
Sobre cómo estuvo el centro de detención.
No le daban poca comida, unos niños que no se bañaban, no los bañábamos, los trataban mal, allí donde estábamos, eran malas con nosotras.
Really powerful to see it from the actual child, even though we didn't see their face and it was in Spanish. But Quinn, tell us about the facilities down there in general. How did it get this bad for children? They are being fed, but there's not enough space for them to sleep. Were Border Patrol folks just caught off guard? What's the deal?
Well, it's hard. It might be hard to say they've been caught off guard since this has been happening for months. We've seen these record inflows of children and family coming across the southern border, overwhelming these facilities. And the Clint station that we were at last week is one of those facilities that was at several times over capacity.
Designed for like 100 people, and they had what, 600, 500,
more than 700 people.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, at this one station that officials we talked to compared to a small police station, not meant to house people long term, definitely not meant to house children for days or weeks at a time. But that's what's been happening. That's how Border Patrol has been forced to cope with the record flows of people. And we've heard these testimonies from kids talking to the lawyers that are responsible for maintaining oversight over some of these facilities. They are detailing very disturbing reports of how they're being treated there.
Yeah, and now, just as we said, for the first time, hearing from the children themselves on camera with those lawyers. Finally, there are some signs, maybe some good news perhaps, that this historic flow of migrants from Central America to the southern border may actually be abating a little bit. The acting commissioner of Border Customs and Border Protection made an announcement just a couple days ago. Here's what he had to say about the new trends.
It's become clear that over the past 3 weeks since the administration reached a new agreement with Mexico that we've seen a substantial increase in the number of interdictions on the Mexican southern border and a sincere effort to address the transportation networks coming through Mexico. These initiatives are making an impact, and we are now anticipating a significant reduction in border crossing numbers for June, up to 25% when compared to the record level in May.
So good news?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what this means, right? Because it's hard to pin down the exact action that U.S. immigration officials may have taken to cause these effects. We do know that seasonal changes, basically getting hotter in the summer.
It's hot down there now, so fewer people tend to come.
We were down there, it was over 100 degrees. That definitely stifles people's ability to move and walk through the sun. We also know Mexican authorities have been cracking down on the southern part of the U.S., the Mexico-Guatemala border.
This was that threat that President Trump made a couple weeks ago that Mexico needed to do more. So that may actually be paying off.
It could be paying off. The threat to getting Mexican officials motivated to crack down on the border could be paying off. It's hard to know, again, what the change in U.S. immigration policy has been that would have affected the slight decrease we've seen.
Great. Quinn Owen, thanks so much for your reporting. We will be sure to follow you on Twitter and on Facebook because you are all over it. Appreciate that. Turning now to an extraordinary weekend in American foreign policy. Donald Trump becoming the first American U.S. president in office to step foot inside North Korea, setting the stage for a possible reboot in nuclear talks, even as the administration now appears to be losing ground with Iran. That country today announcing it has officially blown its uranium enrichment caps imposed by the 2015 deal. For more on what's next, I'm joined now by our White House reporter Catherine Faulders, State Department reporter Connor Finnegan, and Mark Takola, the Vice President of Korea and Economic Institute of America, former diplomat in Korea. Mark, thanks so much for coming in. Catherine, I want to start with you, though. How did this historic visit come about? I think a lot of people were sort of surprised over the weekend, Sunday morning, to see these pictures.
Yeah, you've seen those historic images. It was a hastily arranged visit. The president essentially asked for Kim Jong-un to meet him in the DMZ via tweet. So you see him right there being greeted by Kim Jong-un, getting ready to walk into North Korea. You see him about to set foot there for the first time. And look, the president said he was optimistic about this meeting. He was even tweeting today that it was great to call on Chairman Kim of North Korea to have a very well-covered meeting, presumably referring to the media coverage. Good things can happen for all, Devin. You see those historical images right there. But what's unclear is what exactly this will accomplish. In North Korea's nuclear program, it's still fully in place. So how does this translate to a deal? Of course, the president says he's optimistic. He's insisted that progress has been made through both of their previous summits, but still, what ultimately will come from this?
Mark, you have tracked Korea for some time and spent some time over there in the region. We watched Democrats over the past 24 hours attack the president, say that this was a made-for-TV summit. The former Vice President Joe Biden just put out a statement a few minutes ago. He said Trump has elevated a murderous tyrant for almost nothing. Do you think that's a fair characterization of where we're at?
I would not say that's fair. I think that the meeting across the DMZ between Trump and Kim was a solution to a problem. The problem was, after the Hanoi breakdown, how do you get the talks restarted? And this was a way to do that.
So we seem one step closer to maybe resuming some sort of negotiation of some kind.
I think both Trump and Kim instructed their negotiators now to get back together and try to make some progress.
What do you make of the criticism, though, that the president has basically normalized Kim, someone who has such a horrible record on human rights, maintains all those weapons? Would you be comfortable with simply a freeze, which seems to be possibly where we're headed here? Was that a passable solution if we just sort of make peace and a status quo for a while?
Not indefinitely. And for now, it's the right way to start. You have the freeze, and then the idea is to get the trend line towards denuclearization, not towards a bigger program.
So anything other than belligerence is a good step forward at this stage.
Yeah, both sides are under some pressure. Kim Jong-un, too, is under great pressure from the international sanctions. So he can't wait forever.
He can't wait forever. Connor Finnegan joins us at the State Department. Connor, as Mark alluded to there, North Korea hasn't actually tested a nuclear weapon or fired an intercontinental ballistic missile for some time, but have they actually taken any steps toward denuclearization? They did sign that pact back in Singapore a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's right, Devin. Over a year ago now, they signed that pact to commit themselves to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But what was striking on Sunday is that Secretary Pompeo said they still don't have a definition, an agreed definition of what that even means. As you said, you know, it's been months, it's been over nearly 2 years now since they last tested a nuclear device, but they've done nothing to dismantle their existing weapons program. And if anything, you could argue that given the amount of time that they've had since these summits, they've been able to expand the program to perfect their capabilities. We saw a short while ago they test-fired short-range ballistic missiles, which President Trump dismissed because they weren't long-range missiles. But they've done nothing to get rid of their existing nuclear weapons stockpile, which U.S. officials say could be as many as 60 nuclear weapons.
Oh, it's incredible, Mark. They sit on that stockpile. You just said a freeze would be a good thing, essentially for the short term, just to buy us some time. Do you think Kim Jong-un can be trusted to take it further? Do you think he's just waiting Trump out, and then we'll go back to his activities?
Well, that's two different questions. Whether you trust him or not is kind of irrelevant. I mean, the idea of negotiations and verification regimes is to make sure that people do what they're supposed to do. We don't have to trust him. We have to sign a good agreement.
See the action.
See the action.
Right. Okay. And Catherine, what is your reporting today? Mark alluded to another possible summit. Good thing that the talks are restarted. What are you hearing from White House officials? And there was that mention of possibly bringing Kim Jong-un to the White House.
Yeah, well, as Mark was saying, these negotiations, this meeting is a step in the right direction for more negotiations and another summit. Look, another summit definitely is on the table. Now, whether that happens at the White House or somewhere else is to be determined. But as you saw in those images, the president right on the spot invited Kim Jong-un to come here to the White House. So we'll see where the next one is.
And what would your advice be to this White House, Mark, if you were in that Oval Office today on what they needed to do next? Yeah. Would it be to schedule something? Would it be a good idea to bring Kim here?
No, I think what needs to happen next is what they said they would do at the DMZ, which is start negotiations. I'm not looking for a deal. I'm looking for a process.
Lower level, staff level.
Staff level has to do it. There's no way in the world that President Trump and Kim Jong-un can sit down, the two of them, and draft a nuclear agreement. That has to be done by staff level. So for me, the question is not whether Kim and Donald Trump trust each other. It's whether they trust their own negotiators to be able to make a deal.
It doesn't appear that they've done that so far.
Well, so far it's been very top-down, and that's not a bad way to start. But it has to get to the working level, or progress will not be made.
We do hear that a lot. Finally, thanks, Mark. Want to go back to Connor Finnegan for one note on Iran. Connor, the IAEA today said that the Iranians have actually blown their caps on uranium enrichment as part of that 2015 deal. What does that actually mean? Is there really any possibility that we could roll things back to where that deal left it, or are we now back in uncharted territory towards a irreversible problem?
You know, Devin, at this point, I think it's still hard to say. The European Union came out with a statement shortly after the UN Nuclear Watchdog Agency confirmed that Iran had breached these caps. And they said that they're going to monitor the situation and see, you know, whether or not Iran would be willing to bring back the progress that they've made on their enrichment levels. So far, Iran is making good on a threat, really. What they said to the European Union is that if you do not make up for the fact that these U.S. sanctions are causing so much economic upheaval and turmoil in Iran, then we will renege on our part of the agreement. So far, though, they've made this one breach. They've promised the next week or so that they will enrich uranium at levels higher than is allowed in the deal, not just you know, the stockpiles that they have, but also the percentage of enrichment. But the U.S. has been slowly monitoring the situation, calling on the Iranians to abide by their commitments. The question, I think, at this point is, even if there was a different administration in power in January 2021, would there even be a deal left to salvage?
All right, Connor, thank you so much. And we should say the White House just put out a statement minutes ago saying maximum pressure on the Iranian regime will continue until its leaders alter their course of action. So no movement there. Mike Tokola with the in your organization, Mark, was the Economic Institute of America. Thank you so much for coming in. Our thanks again to Connor and to Catherine. Shifting gears now to the race for 2020 in the Democratic field, now riding that wave out of the first first Democratic primary debate down in Miami. It was been a big week for all those candidates, cashing in on big fundraising numbers after those performances. Also trying to take a closer look at those poll numbers. We have our full team coverage of the bounce out of the debates now, joined by 538 Sarah Frostenberg. Zoreen Shaw joins us from Los Angeles. She covers the Harris campaign, and Justin Gomez is out there in, yet again, South Bend, Indiana, with Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who has some pretty impressive fundraising numbers. But let's start with Sarah, because Sarah, you and your organization 538 have been taking a closer look at who won the debate, and over 2 nights, this unprecedented display of more than 20 candidates. You're out with a new analysis this afternoon, which actually has crowned 1 or 2 winners. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so what we saw from the leading up to the debate and then following is that Harris and Elizabeth Warren earned the most support, and a lot of that support came from Biden, a little bit from Sanders as well, but Harris in particular had a stellar performance, going from about 8% in support to nearly 17%, so doubling her support among voters.
And you were taking a close look at the before and after to get a baseline of that. So good news for Warren and Harris. And Zoreen, Kamala Harris has really been riding this wave over the past 24, 48 hours. She has been out in the gay pride parades. She's been blasting out fundraising emails. Tell us how she's been capitalizing on her much praised performance.
Hi, Devin. Yeah, I was with her in San Francisco this weekend for the Pride festivities. And Pride is a high-energy event, but she literally looked like she had had a boost after that debate. She came out skipping on stage practically. She was dancing on her car during that parade route. People actually came up to the press booth to ask us if they had missed Kamala Harris before she got on stage. And Devin, you're going to like this one. One person who I caught up with in San Francisco this weekend was former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. And I asked him about the debate performance, and he said she is against the death penalty, but she knows how to administer it, and she did. And that's a sentiment that some people in San Francisco feel right now. So her team is hoping that they can keep this momentum up. She's going to be in Iowa this week, and then after that she heads to New Orleans and South Carolina.
Now, she's really hitting the road, and certainly has good reason to be confident after some of those numbers that Sarah talked about. But Justin, somebody who's actually talking about big money coming out of this debate is Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Tell us about this really unbelievable figure that he raised in the second quarter, a lot of it coming around these performances in the debates and out on the trail.
Yeah, this number is very, very impressive, Devin. $24.8 million raised by the Buttigieg camp in the second quarter of this year. That's triple the amount from the first quarter, almost quadrupling it. In the first quarter, they raised $7 million. This time around, as I said, $24.8 million. That came out to about an average donation of $47.42. Right now, the campaign says that they have $22.6 million cash on hand. So that's going to play into effect as they roll into the third quarter, ramp up their events and progress in these early voting states. South Bend, a very small town. I ran into Buttigieg's press secretary at breakfast this morning, asked them what they plan to do with all this money that they have now on hand. They said they're going to boost their staffing in early states like Nevada and South Carolina coming up.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody why the money the figures are so important. Obviously, it speaks to the campaign's success or lack thereof. Also gives them some durability, lasting power, if you will, to pay that staff, build that operation. So this is certainly a good thing for Pete Buttigieg, and you should note too, as Justin was saying there, $24 million is on par with something that Bernie Sanders and his army of grassroots supporters raised in the first quarter. But I got to go back to Sarah here, because Sarah, I was looking at your analysis on 538, the debate bounce. I was a bit surprised to see that Mayor Pete wasn't getting more of a bounce statistically in light of what we were seeing from some of the numbers that Justin just talked about. Why is that? What are you seeing with Pete?
Right. So to be clear, Buttigieg's favorability did increase. He still had a good performance. You can see on our website on the scatter plot, he's almost over to exceeding expectations. But I think it was a tough night back-to-back. Booker also had a really great performance alongside Warren and Harris, and it was just hard to secure more support from voters.
Yeah, it sure was. Speaking of Harris, Zorine, I just want to ask you just about some of the criticism that's emerged about her in the past 24 hours. We see this a lot in campaigns after somebody gets a good bounce out of a debate. We see their opponents come on the attack. A number of Biden surrogates are coming after her for her confrontation with the former vice president. And this quote caught our eye in Politico, the first ever African-American woman to serve in the United States Senate who's endorsed Joe Biden. This is Carol Moseley Braun of Illinois, has said we can be proud of her, Kamala Harris, but her ambition got it wrong about Joe. He's the best there is. For her to take that tack is sad. Not the only thing she's getting buffeted on. How is she taking some of this criticism right now?
You're exactly right. The Politico piece basically came out with some prominent African Americans saying that these attacks were unfair that Harris had against Biden because he's had this career of being an advocate for civil rights issues. But look, her campaign is focused on the positive, right? The first 24 hours after that debate, she raised more money than she ever has before. $2 million from 63,000 people. 58% of them were first-time donors. So her campaign is focused on this, and they're just really hoping that momentum lasts.
And Justin, before we let you go, what's next for the mayor? He spent so much of the lead up to the debate in his hometown there, dealing with that crisis in the police department. Is he still hunkered down, or is he hitting the road?
He's hitting the road tomorrow. He'll be in Chicago to attend the Rainbow Push convention. And then from there, he will head to Iowa. He has about a 2-day swing tour through there. He's rolling out a policy plan in Sioux City on Wednesday, and then he'll do some 4th of July festivities in other parts of the state.
All right, courting the very important African-American vote, which he struggled with there at the Rainbow Push Coalition. Justin Gomez in South Bend, thank you. Zorine Shaw joining us from Los Angeles. Appreciate her reporting. And Sarah Frostenberg from our friends with 538 has a really smart analysis today on the bounce and the winners out of that debate, so be sure to check that out. Thank you so much for joining us here today in the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. We're here 3:30 Eastern Time every day on ABC News Live. Hope you join us. We'll be right back here tomorrow.